can view it again. Okay, and we have a couple of participants online, so that's why you see it a little differently. It's not PowerPoint, so I'm going to be probably chatting with the folks online, so if there's any questions, I'm going to look over here to see if there's any questions from them. If you do have any questions, I may repeat the questions so that they hear me at home, since I have the mic here in my lapel. So let me just check that everyone can hear me. Okay, so it looks like we're good. I wanted to have sort of a convening of a lot of our CTE programs for a discussion that really I've been having with a lot of the CTE deans, a lot of the folks outside of PCC. That, is that a loose wire? Oh, it looks like we have some technical difficulties here. Okay. Thank you, sir. With regards to the region of LA, I've been lucky enough for the past year to really join a lot of great folks around Southern California in a regional approach to a lot of career technical education programs that our Vice Chancellor, Von Quinlivan, has really been for the forefront, providing a lot of leadership in this new venture for the state, really. Many of you have seen many of the messaging that's been out there with Doing What Matters, and that campaign I brought Steve Glyer, the chair of the LA Regional Consortia here for the business and engineering technology folks, as well as some of the deans to meet Stephen as the chair, and for him to describe the whole procession. So it's the landscape is changing. That's essentially what's going on, and it's essentially focused on the jobs and the economy, and using a lot of metrics. I'll talk at the very end of my discussion what's called the launch board. That's going to be a future webinar for which, again, I'm going to invite everybody to come in, where I'm going to actually train you to actually look up your program and look up your own students to see how they're doing, because it's a longitudinal study that they're going to be putting online for us to see of all CTE programs. CTE programs are quite important for the state of California. That's, I think, established. If anything, you're going to see a further support of this and continual support from the state and federal guidelines, inclusive of potentially even changing the FTES formula for our CTE programs. Right now, pretty much a history class and a CTE class brings in the same FTES numbers. They're looking at even possibly changing that formula to incentivize scheduling more of these types of classes, which are essential for our economy. So there's a lot of great things coming. And this is just sort of my bringing of some communication that I've been part of over the last year, really. So today in particular, we're going to look at CTEA. CTEA, which many of you may or may not know, is actually a federal guideline, a federal Carl Perkins guideline back in '98, I believe, was the first authorization. So we're under CTEA 4. We're looking to be under CTEA 5. And this is basically law from the federal government that it has certain purposes for the particular funding of both secondary and post-secondary institutions. So high schools and community colleges primarily receive the CTEA funding across the United States. This funding is primarily based on economically disadvantaged students within your local school. So literally it's depending on the self-accounting or the registration of students for them to tell us that they're socially, economically disadvantaged. If they don't actually self-report that, then we don't count them. So I'm working with Cindy and some of our new banner systems to actually start deploying better tools to actually get people to get counted, because we're extremely undercounted. Community colleges at our size is getting equal funding to a smaller community college down the street. And it's just disproportionate. It doesn't seem like we're really capturing all the students. So here's the 7 purposes of the law in a succinct method. It's to develop academic and technical standards, to integrate both academics and CTE courses, to develop, implement, and to improve CTE courses, and programs, to disseminate information on the best practices of such, to promote leadership and development, and that would be professional development within our programs, and quality improvement of education. So analyzing, assessing, evaluating programs, and supporting partnerships, typically within high schools, but it could be from community college to community college as well, or four-year school. So the idea is supporting partnerships. So these are the sort of the 7 anchor reasons why CTEA was really brought forth. And within those purposes, there's the primary usage of the funds. In other words, the real funding that happens. Much of this, of course, are maybe items that many of you know. But just to reiterate, there's 9 primary usage of these funds for which are meant to be used primarily. And that's to strengthen the academic and technical skills of CTE programs, to link to a high school or articulation of some sorts or pathways, to establish a work-based learning program where students can develop internship or work readiness skills literally on-site or even within our institution here at PCC. To use of technology. Of course, upgrading technology is quite important for our programs, and hence that's also a primary usage. Professional development, of course, as stipulated before. Evaluation of programs. So it either would be external evaluators, or, for example, if you want to do a study for surveys, or maybe your employers or advisory committees that need folks that will hire students. Any evaluation of your program would also be primary usage. To initiate new programs. I'll mention in a while how in the state chancellor's office, many top codes are changing on a yearly basis. And we should be vigilant of new top codes that are coming up because it shows where the market is going. And we should continually be updating and looking at new programs. We also have expansion of services of scope. In other words, if something works well, how do we expand it? How do we actually make it to some formidable size? Our tutoring is a good example of that Candy helps us out with. Special populations, so individuals who are non-traditional students. This would be multiple categories. It could be women in maybe a mostly male-dominated field. It could be foster children. It could be veterans, etc. So these are the primary usage of the funds as established by the law. And there's further permissive uses of the funds. In other words, funds, these are options that can be used, which be community involvement, bringing parents of potential high school kids to our campus to learn about our program. We do that with, Lionel helps out much with that. Student organizations, our clubs, it can be supported through CTEA. Mentoring models, maybe we establish a sort of a mentorship with the higher classes with the incoming students. Distance education can also be used. Transfer, helping our transfer students to CTE programs where there is such a link. Learning communities, establishing learning communities within faculty where they share each other's discipline and maybe build a cohort model of sorts for their CTE programs. Non-credit courses, which are also short-term vocational certificates in our CECs, can also be supported with CTEA. And finally, job search, being able to help our students land a job as needed after they obtain their credentials or certificates as they go forward. So these establishes the purposes and the uses of funds of CTEA, which are really stipulated by Congress. The state has nothing to do with this. There is a list of non-permissive uses of the funds because, as you have seen, these funds are primarily for program improvement. Right? The idea is that programs are meant to be helped because they're not meeting the needs of specific economically disadvantaged or particular group of students to establish a vibrant program. And so there's actually a very strict non-permissive use of these funds in particular. The main one is the supplanting of programmatic support. So in other words, any funds from CTEA should not be supporting an existing program on a continual basis. Software maintenance is considered supplanting support. And salaries of any individual paid by CTEA over a certain amount of years is considered to be supplanting programmatic support. The idea is that in a salary, which I know some college assistants or maybe consultants, or for that matter even part-time individuals get paid out of CTEA, are to help improve a program for the project of the longevity of a program not to extend over 3 years, to see if the program improves. If it does, then the idea is that the institution institutionalizes that help and it becomes part of the program's budget. Right? And that was a link that I think many of our programs really have been missing here at our college, is that institutional support. It's gotten better over the years, and I'll explain over this past year. I'll explain a little bit what I've been able to achieve, but I think that we still have much more to go on that one particular item. Dues and memberships costs can't be used. Consumable supplies can't be bought with CTEA. Fines or penalties cannot be paid, and neither promotional material of your program or swag. And I think a lot of you have come to that as well. And there's many more, but these are some of the ones that I put in here. So the state of California, the way that they respond to the law, you see, because the Chancellor's Office is responsible to responding to Perkins funds, is they created, each state is different, by the way. The state of California created the 5 core indicators, for which many of you have attended some of our conferences in the past year. It's quite convoluted, it's very complicated, and it's taken me quite a long time to even understand it myself. So the point is that there's negotiated performance targets for which collectively as a college and individually as a program, they monitor how well we're doing in these 5 core indicators. They're pretty straightforward. They measure concentrators of your program, basically anyone who gets a 12 unit of a 2-digit top code. Just to give you an example of what that means, students in the CIS program and students in the computer science program have the 07 top code. They're all counted as 1, essentially, at this point. So as you get furthermore to 4-digit or 6-digit top code, you get more granular to the individual programs, which we can do as well. But really for CTEA funding purposes, they just look at the first 2 numbers, for which business has a whole bunch, nursing 1, 2 has a whole bunch. And they group them all as one big program, essentially. So as soon as your student reaches 12 units, that's all they need to reach, just 12 units, they're counted as part of the cohort, regardless of whichever program they are. If they have more units in one program versus another, that's how they determine where to count the cohort, depending on the number of units in the respective 6-unit top code. I won't get into that. But the SAM A through C is actually quite important in this designation, something that we at this college have not paid attention to. Where SAM C is typically what most of our courses have been designated here at this college, which erroneously has led to, I think, miscounting some of our students in our programs, or miscalculating. SAM D has rarely been used, which is below SAM C. And SAM D should really be your first level class, your entry level class, the looky-loos, the introductory course, because it's never counted through CTEA. What happens as soon as they take 12 units of C and above, then they're counting as a concentrator, and it might ding you because you have a lot of students going through your program and no one's finishing, because the looky-loos are taking a SAM C class. All these little nuances I learned through this core indicator data. So I've consulted with many faculty over the past semester to start actually labeling their courses SAM D, so they don't erroneously count students that are just checking out your program that don't really intend to continue. A completer, which is core 2, is essentially when you gain a certificate or a degree, or you're transfer prepared. In other words, you have 60 transferable units. That's considered a completer. So once again, whether you get a certificate or a degree, or you've gotten 60 transferable units, you're considered a completer. The other 2, or 3, sorry, is persistence. Persistence is essentially, did a student continue from one semester to the other, or did they transfer to a Cal State or UC, which is of course our state programs, or any private school which is part of the Perkins data mart. So persistence is counted. So if your students transfer to our Cal State or UCs for sure, and some private schools, they get counted. Okay. Employment is core number 4, which is essentially how many students obtained a job a year after they leave the cohort. Remember the 12 units, after they get 12 units, they get a job after that. And lastly, core 5 is the special populations that I mentioned just a minute ago. So they track these for every program. So let me give you an example of what this looks like for a program. And I choose biotechnology here because it was the most interesting one. So if you look at this slide here, I hope you can see the colors. The red line there is the completers. The blue is the concentrators, while the green is the persistent. The reason why I put this one up here is because biotech is probably the only program for which more students transfer out than finish a certificate or even get employed. And you can see the green being above almost everything because they leave before even reaching 12 units. So here's a clear indication that in this program, students do lead to transfer. That's the green line above the red line, or even the blue line. And let me give you another example. Oh, by the way, this is a trend from 2009 to 2013. Here's accounting. Most programs are traditionally laid out like accounting is. You see the blue line at the very top, the concentrator. Remember, concentrators are 12 units. They broke the 12-unit mark. The green is the persistence. So the gap between the blue and the green over at the furthest right means students dropped out that particular year. If you notice, the green is actually above the blue in 2010, so chances are that more students transferred out that particular year than than normal for some reason. So maybe they saw the economy tanking and so they all transferred or something. So that's how you read these lines. The red is the completers. Remember, completers are certificate, degree, or 60 transferable units. The purple one way at the bottom is employed. And so when I speak to programs, and some of you have already spoken to already, my goal is to help you join the red, which is the completers, to the blue. So to get the red closer to the blue. In other words, you have more concentrators being completers, right? People are fulfilling your certificate or transferring or getting a degree. Of course, the job that we need to do is also get the purple closer to the red. In other words, when they complete, they get a job. And there's certain programs amongst us for which the red and the purple are correlated directly. All people who complete get a job. And there's several programs in our sector that do have those red and the purple aligned. And that's great. That's a good sign. So, I'll sit down with each and any one of you at any point, and I can send these data to you so you can read yours in a future time. So I did a lot of this analysis through CTEA. So what happened over the last 5 years, at least the data that I have? Well, we used to have much of funds tied up in CTEA with funds going to the DSPS. So in other words, individuals that were in your classes that were part of being serviced through our DSPS office here were being paid through CTEA. The Learning Assistance Center also contributed a lot of funds from CTEA, as well as a cross-sell. That was actually about 50% of the total funds for CTEA. So half of the funds were tied in non-direct programmatic input into our CTE programs. I'm glad to say that all of that is pretty much back in the pot. I've moved all that, much of people that were on CTEA into permanent positions, or I secured other funding, so DSPS in particular, so they can serve as our students and not through CTEA, because I wanted it directly to go to the programs. So now we almost have, I think, almost 80 to 85% of the funds going directly to programs as opposed to 50%. What this caused, though, is it created a limited services to our programs. Only about 17 at most programs were serviced at all, out of possibly about the 40 programs that exist here in our campus. So only 17, less than half, were being helped. And there really was no competition for the amounts. In other words, people, I guess, perpetually just got whatever amounts were given, and that was pretty much it. And who knows, maybe that was for some longitudinal study, and maybe it worked, I don't know. That's what those graphs are for. And this it may be hard to see from where you guys are sitting, but what this graph shows is all the 17 programs that received CTEA funds over the last 5 years, and roughly how much funding each program got per milestone. So in other words, for a certificate, for a degree, for a transfer, for a AA degree, all those core indicators that are measured per milestone. And I want to point out that the median cost was about $256 per milestone, which is roughly around here. So there was a disproportionate disbalance of programs obtaining way more per milestone because of either their size, the SAMDs versus SAMCs, whatever. There's many different reasons why. But when you look at the amount of support that each program was getting, it was definitely disproportionate. And you can see I graphed it over a trend line of 5 years. But I took this median amount of $256, and you'll see how that's going to come up a little bit later. And by the way, I'm going to email all of these slides to you, so you'll get to see the actual programs close if you can't see them. You're probably looking for yours right now. Right. Don't worry. So my attempt to try to bring some sort of objective plateau to this process, which I don't know if there was an existence of such, was an online application that some of you submitted last spring or in the summertime. Well, 17 programs roughly asked for about almost $2 million. so I think that experiment just didn't work out too well. And so it left me, as you can see, with those wires trying to untangle the purposes, whether it's on the allowable expenditure, not allowable expenditure. It was a very difficult to navigate. And I read every single one of them, and they're all merits, full of merit. Don't get me wrong, but it really was really difficult. I put the apportionment there. Cindy, what was it? It was $4. Right. So we only got for this next year about $500,000. So it was the least we've gotten over the last 10 years, and I think we're just miscounting people. And we're working on that. So here I am sitting with $2 million requests, really, and only $500,000 to provide. Well, many of you don't realize, but we actually had to move Cindy and other folks in other offices all last fall, and it was quite hectic. We had to move technology, move phones, move everything, and that took and build spaces. Many of you have visited our new space over in the IT building. We have a nice suite. Conference rooms are being built out, etc., and for which I'll invite you later. So it was quite hectic for the CTEA office, but we didn't get to do some of the. Even if I would have given Cindy some of the results, she was offline for like a month, pretty much. Anyways, so it was difficult to just move individuals. But I am glad that we institutionalized a lot of the programs and personnel in the fall as well, freeing up some more funds. Well, another thing that also stalled much of this in the fall was this new rollout. This is no longer new. It's been out for about a year already. Is the Doing What Matters campaign. In a nutshell, is essentially the Chancellor's Office attempt to really empower the employers more than anyone to really help us out to provide leadership in what they're asking for in their work environment. So they're actually aligning resources with deputy sector navigators, which some of you've met your deputy sector navigator. There's 8 of them in this region. If I haven't introduced you to your deputy sector navigators, maybe that there's one not selected, but I've met all 8. Great folks. Behind those deputy sector navigators, they bring in a wealth of information, especially industry leaders. Media had theirs, small business had theirs, hospitality had theirs, manufacturing had theirs, trade had theirs. We had trade folks here. The ICT, the CIS, digital media had theirs. Energy had theirs. So there's a lot of folks who already have been joining with the deputy sector navigators. And the whole purpose is that we focus on exactly the economy in our region. Now, why is that important? Well, it deals with something that very few of us have been dealing with, and that's with labor market information. How do we make sense of the world that our students walk into? Do we know what's expected of them when they go into the workforce? So they really have been trying to inculcate upon me and myself upon you to really start researching, with my help, what the labor market looks like for our students, where possibly we're training them for jobs which we don't even know exist. So looking at current and future employment data in our local area, the number of completers in our local area from other community colleges. In other words, if Citrus or Glendale or ELAC or LA City, which are really within 15 miles of our radius here, if they have a program similar to ours, are they producing more students than us, or equal amount, and whether or not we're flooding the market. In other words, we're actually making our students less likely to get hired if there's more people graduating for a specific program. What are the average wages that students are expected to have depending on their credentials? Have we done large-scale surveys of our graduates and what they're doing out in the real world now? Do we have focus groups and really have a qualitative analysis of our program as our students have experienced? And remember, this labor market is not advisory committees. That's not at all. This is really objective data that we're looking at. And the focus groups being, of course, qualitative. So how does it look like for us? This chart shows, I'm glad it shows up. It shows the median earning per industry in LA County. So I took all of LA County, and I said, okay, give me, I summarized about, you can see half a dozen industries, maybe a little bit more, 15, 16. And you can see that the bulk of the industries, which is government, healthcare, retail, hospitality, manufacturing, professional technical services, are really the bulk of our economy. That's about 40 to 50% of our jobs. Each circle on the far right there is about 400,000 jobs. There's about 4 million jobs in LA County. So each circle is about 400,000 jobs. But you can see some industries like information technology pays a little bit better, even though they're a little smaller, right? And then of course you have finance and even other folks who get paid even more, mining, oil, and gas. But you can see the number of jobs in that industry is really, really tiny. So the circle size represents how many jobs are in that industry. And of course, you want to be the larger circle and as high as in the totem pole as possible. So we all here in this room probably fit under government, which is probably the largest circle in there, and the highest one of the big ones that you see in that row there. I don't know, maybe professional and technical services is a little bit smaller. Anyway, so I started with this. Okay, this is our local economy in a big view. So what I then did locally for our particular programs is I established essentially a study of the number of jobs in LA County to some opportunity ratio for each individual program. I'll explain what an opportunity ratio is. It's called a need. It's a fact. It's just a variable. And so the circle that you're going to see in a moment is essentially how much our programs impact the local economy. In other words, if someone program is graduating 20 students and their average wage is $20 an hour, then that impact is $400 an hour for that program, right? If someone's graduating only 10 students but they're getting paid $60 an hour, their economic impact is actually $600 an hour to the local economy. So even though they're graduating less students, their impact is more, right? And so those sort of balances of whether or not we're fulfilling labor market and needs is what I began to do. So this is really just strictly looking at our labor market information for our programs and our students. So the variable called impact, which is going to be the size of our circles, the impact, is how many dollars per hour our programs impact our local economy. Basically, graduates, completers, times their average salary range within that discipline of ours. So you can see the PCC completers, which is core number 2, the potential, which is just a factor based on job outlook and total completions in LA County. In other words, If Citrus or Glendale or someone else is graduating a whole bunch of your program, well, guess what? Their job outlook and their potential isn't that great, right? So in other words, I'm taking into account the local job market in our LA County per each program, which for some programs is 100%, because there's a lot of jobs in that sector and there's not enough completers in our local area. For some jobs, they're actually dipped down to 40%. There's a gluttony of those individuals in your industry for which their potential isn't that great, even though they're finishing your program. So the potential is a real data for our students and how competitive it is out there for them. And so this is just a factor with those two numbers. And then of course the median earnings of that. And by the way, I got all this information through a database that we purchased, ESMI. It's a $10,000 database. It's a bunch of data in there. Data from wages and what companies report for their employees. So this is really vetted data. And I'll share that information with you. The need, which is the percentage of a program, is essentially how many completers are finishing your program to the ratio of the average number of participants in your second level class. Remember that 12-unit factor that I was mentioning earlier, the concentrator? Well, by the time they're second class, you know, they're not 12 units, but they're pretty much already somewhat committed. And of course, the